The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selina MacKenzie.
Now, our final guest was in an abusive relationship for 6 years and so really understands the tangled confusion you can feel. After getting free, she decided to get qualified as a coach and counsellor so she can help others in a similar situation. To tell us about self-love after abuse, welcome to the show, Zoe Parsons.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're welcome, Zoe. So, first of all, can you tell us a bit about your backstory?
Yeah, sure. So I was in an abusive relationship for 6 years. I didn't realize it was abusive, mainly because my understanding of what abuse was, I always remember my mum saying to me, oh, if a man ever gives you a black eye, you must leave. And I remember being a teenager at the time and thinking, well, yeah, why wouldn't you? That kind of, I didn't really understand the logic. But then I found myself married. And after I left, and it was 6 months after I left, I did get a black eye. Oh. I kind of realized that actually what I'd experienced was really abusive, but it took me a really, really long time to understand what it was that was abusive about that relationship.
So was it more emotional abuse when you were in the marriage?
There was emotional abuse to start with. I mean, when I think about when we first started dating and I look back with the knowledge that I have now, and I mean, one of the things that I work a lot with clients is being able to understand red flags. And when I think about the red flags of when we was actually dating, there were so many, but I just didn't think that there was anything wrong. And I think what we often do is when we've come out of a relationship and we go into a new relationship, we benchmark. So we look at our ex and we go, oh, my new person I'm dating is nothing like my ex. So straight away we do an equation and we think that means they're better. But really all that means is they're actually different. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily better. And that is really often why we can end up going from abusive relationship to abusive relationship, because we're not creating our own benchmark, our own standard of what we want and what we need in a relationship. We just go, well, I didn't like that, so I don't want this. And the thing is with abuse, it's obviously it manifests differently by different people. You've got different behaviors. You've got kind of more covert behaviors, more overt behaviors. I mean, with my relationship, there was definitely emotional manipulation. There was gaslighting. There was blackmail. There was emotional blackmail. There was silent treatment. And there was physical abuse, but I didn't really identify it as physical abuse at the time. And I think, often when you're in a relationship, so for example, if the person, especially if it's a man to a woman, and they're towering over you, shouting at you, or they're blocking your exit from a door, that is actually classed as physical abuse because they're using their physical body to intimidate you and to stop you from doing something that you actually wanted to do.
Yeah. And I guess that can go because, of course, men get abused as well. And if the man is a lot smaller in stature than the woman, then she could physically do that to a man, couldn't she?
Without a doubt. And I mean, I work with men as well. And I often find that with men, they'll have boiling hot coffee thrown on them or, that type of physical abuse, or they'll be kind of stopped from exiting places, maybe grabbed. But because obviously women, we're not as strong as men. But yeah, I mean, physical abuse definitely happens. And I know in my relationship that he would grab my wrist. He would stop me from leaving the room. He would pinch me. And then I would say to him, why have you done that? That really hurt. And then he would say to me, I haven't done anything. What are you talking about? And I'd be like, what do you mean? And then he'll say, well, is there a bruise there? And I would look at my arm and I would be like, no, there's no bruise. Oh, maybe I'm making things up. Maybe I'm oversensitive. And obviously, this is where you see the combination of physical abuse with gaslighting, the emotional abuse.
That's a typical example of gaslighting, isn't it? Making it feel like it's your fault.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And it just makes you so confused because you end up not trusting yourself. You end up trusting them more. You become more dependent. It's really confusing.
And how can our listeners, if anyone's resonating with this, how can they learn to see the red flags and to pick up on the red flags? Because that's obviously, that was hard for you, and I'm sure it's hard for a lot of other people.
Definitely. I mean, I think with red flags, obviously you can list behaviors. So, I mean, if anyone goes on my website, they'll be able to download a checklist of red flags for an abusive relationship, but also green flags of a healthy relationship. But essentially, the biggest indicator of red flags is how you feel. So do you feel confused? Then generally there's something not quite right going on, because in a healthy relationship, you do not feel confused when there's been a disagreement, because you're able to discuss and you're able to get to a point of clarity. Do you feel pressured? So if you feel pressured to respond to their text message, their phone call, to stop what you're doing, then generally that's an indicator of some kind of red flag, some kind of abusive behavior. The other thing to think about is the pace of the relationship. So is the relationship happening really quickly? So are you essentially going from dating to I love you to let's live in together, let's have babies within a really short space of time, and then you put intensity into the mix. So is it really intense? Like you feel that you've met your soulmate, your twin flame, that you can't live without them. And really, those kind of 4 things are main indicators that there's kind of definite red flags happening within your relationship.
And then I suppose once you've recognised them, it's easy to say leave, but it's hard to leave for some people, either for financial reasons, because of children, or just because they're frightened to leave. So would you suggest a leaving plan?
Oh, definitely. I mean, when I left my ex, I didn't realise that I needed a safe leaving plan. I just thought it was a normal relationship. We can separate, we'll get divorced, we'll sort out, had a little girl with him. I was like, we'll sort out custody, it'll all be amicable and everything will be fine. But statistically, leaving is actually the most dangerous time, and you're 50% at higher risk of being injured when you're leaving. So you definitely need to have some kind of safe leaving plan, because if you don't, you're putting yourself at a higher risk and your children at a higher risk. And I mean, so in my situation, what happened is I knew I wanted to separate. Emotionally, I was just exhausted by it. But I just thought, I can't do this anymore. So I called the police. I had him removed from the property. And then because I thought we could be amicable, I thought it would be okay. He would come, he would see my daughter. But what I didn't realize is the obsessive stalking nature that abusive men have. Like, he used to say to me, I own you. And I used to think, no, you don't. That's just a weird thing to say. But actually, that type of mentality, that type of ownership, that level of control that he felt he had over me was actually a really serious indicator of risk. And I mean, I left him. I thought, okay, everything will be fine. And then literally about 4 months after we'd separated, I remember waking up and thinking, oh, I couldn't find my mobile phone. I was like, that's weird. And it turned out that he'd broken into my home.
Oh, no.
He'd got the ladder, climbed up in the middle of the night, broken into my home, watched me while I was sleeping, stole my mobile phone and let himself out. And I reported it to the police, and the police was like, but why would he do that? And I was like, because he was always obsessed with my phone. He always wanted to know like what was happening, who I was talking to, and all of these types of control. And the police were like, well, it makes no sense, but we'll take your report. And then a month later, he actually broke into my home. I had come back from an evening out. I was with a friend, and he battered down my door with a concrete block and broke in, attacked me, attacked my friend. I ended up in hospital, having to have 12 stitches in my face. My friend, he bit his face, so his face was bitten. And it was at that point, the police then said about the break-in. They were like, oh, yes, we're now going to get a forensic team and we're going to investigate that incident properly. And I was like, yeah, I know. I was kind of like, okay. But at this point, I was still trying to come to terms, and I hadn't even really accepted that the relationship was abusive. I just thought there was issues. I was like, there's definitely something wrong. But had I had a safe leaving plan, then my approach when I called the police and got him removed from the property, I would have done things totally different.
Yeah.
And I probably wouldn't have ended up in hospital.
Yeah, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? I'm sorry to hear your story. That's awful what you went through. And I've heard this story many times before, that you don't get help from the police. I'm just thinking about people I've interviewed in the UK before. They just say it's domestic abuse, or we can't do anything until he hurts you. Well, it's too late then, isn't it?
I know. It was weird because throughout the marriage, the police had visited the property probably about 5 or 6 times. Like, I think there was one time I called them, and then most of the times they came was because the neighbors heard me screaming for help. And then the police came. And I remember the police just saying, what's happening? And I would say, oh, we're having an argument about this, or we was arguing about money. And they would do what's called a dash risk assessment, where they ask you a whole heap of questions. And then depending on what you score, depends on your risk factor. But I didn't know at the time that was what they were doing. I just thought it was standard questions. And it wasn't until probably about 6 months after I left, and I was trying to understand abuse, and I did this online quiz, and it turned out it was a dash risk assessment. And it turned out that my score was like 38 out of 40, which essentially means that I'm at high risk of homicide. And I was like, the police would have known this every single time they came. And yet, not once did anyone say to me, do you realize you're in an abusive relationship? You are at risk. You need to do this. Phone this number, reach out for support. And it literally wasn't until I was seriously injured that the police finally took, obviously, my previous report of the break-in serious. And then they asked me further questions. And I mean, in the end, they ended up doing a proper investigation, and there were some serious charges. And he was actually put in prison for 11 and a half years.
Oh, good.
For what he did do to me. He's still in prison now. So in the end, yes, the police were helpful, but
bit late.
Yeah, it was a struggle. I mean, I remember going to the police station because when he was in prison, before I got the restraining order as the first kind of charge that he got found guilty for, he would phone me incessantly. And when I say incessantly, I mean, I would have like 50, 60 missed calls from my mobile. And then if he couldn't get hold of me on my mobile, he would phone me on through Facebook Messenger. And if he couldn't get hold of me on Facebook Messenger, he would ring my work number. And if he couldn't get hold of me on my work number, he would ring me on, Twitter. Or there was just a constant bombardment. So I went to the police station and I said to the police officer at the front desk, I remember it was a woman, and I said, look, my ex is harassing me. And I showed her screenshots and I said, surely there must be something that you're doing. She laughed at me. She laughed and said, oh, this is just normal behavior. Don't worry. Just be happy that you have a man who wants you that much.
Oh, my goodness. That's shocking.
Isn't that shocking?
Oh, it's awful. It really is.
What he was doing is actually a crime. But what I find is you as the victim, you have to, one, know the law so you can go into the police station and actually advocate for yourself and be like, well, no, actually, this is coercive control. This is stalking and harassment. This is non-fatal strangulation. This is ABH. This is GBH. This is rape. This is, you know what I mean? It's like you have to go in there prepared with the information. And then you have to be in the position of actually being able to have the vocabulary to explain what it is that's happening so that you don't sound like a crazy person.
Yeah. Then they wonder why women don't come forward all the time.
Yeah. And then you've also got the statistics. I mean, I think the most shocking statistic I heard was out of every 1,000 rapes that get reported, only 20 will get investigated. And of those 20, only 3 will get a guilty verdict.
Blimey. Well, as far as your website's concerned, Self-Love After Abuse, can you help people online? Because I'm sure there are people listening all over that might want your help and can't necessarily get to see you.
I do work with people online. So long as we can work out time difference, and obviously if you speak English, then all my sessions are totally done via Zoom, or we do on WhatsApp video call. And I mean, but also on my website, I have lots of resources. So if you need to put together if you need a safe leaving plan, I've got that where you can download it. If you want to know if you're in an abusive relationship, then there's the quiz to help you with that. If you're worried about your teenager being in an abusive relationship, because 1 in 6 teenagers end up in an abusive relationship. When I say teenagers, I mean essentially children from the age of 12. Oh, so I've got resources on there to help you if you're a parent. Also if you're going to family court, I've got a download on there to help you prepare for if you're representing yourself in family court. Because what I found is, yes, you've got charities and services out there, but often they're not always connecting the pieces. So for instance, Refuge will help you with accommodation and different resources available. And it's kind of, you have to know where to go to be able to get everything. And what I've done in my safe leaving plan is I've kind of connected all the dots.
That's wonderful. Well, sadly, we're out of time. Can I just ask, are you in a happy, healthy relationship now, Zoe?
I am in a happy, healthy relationship, and it's amazing.
Wonderful.
And I highly recommend it.
You're an inspiration. And just once more, the website is selfloveafterabuse.com. Zoe Parsons, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story today.
Me.
You're welcome.
Thank
Bye-bye.
You. Bye.